So far, we've been learning about the balance, as we said, between physical mitzvahs, which are the core of Judaism, that creates a home for God here in the lowest realm. That's actually the reason the Alter Rebbe explained why the whole world was created. So whenever you do a physical mitzvah, now that's completely transparent. Unlike the rest of the world where God's essence is hidden, God's essence is completely transparent. We know that's what God wants Jews to do. And boom, you've encountered the infinite. On the other hand, that's still just a physical thing you're doing. How do you feel about it? What's your kavanah? What's your sense of devotion while you're doing it? That infuses the physical mitzvah not with just transparency to God's essence, but with actual light, with what we call a soul. A soul. So yes, when I do a physical mitzvah, that's the point of existence. Not to negate that, but now do I want to leave that mitzvah without a soul? Or do I want to infuse that mitzvah with all kinds of love and joy and respect and awe? And that, as we'll learn, gives the mitzvah wings to ascend to various higher worlds. So we have 4 spiritual worlds that we've learned about. The mitzvah starts off in the world of Asiya, and it will remain there if I do it just with the knowledge that I've done a mitzvah, it's a beautiful thing, boom, I did it. That's a mitzvah that, as we'll learn, just hangs out in the lowest spiritual world. If I now add a natural love and awe, one that I didn't create and generate, but one that's just inside and I revealed it, that brings it up, as you learn, to the world of Yetzirah, the second world, and it rises up to that level. And if I meditate, as we've learned in our class, and create intellectually generated love and awe, now I can even raise it up to the third world, Bria, which is the world of intellect, so to speak. And we just learned that even if I can't normally get my mitzvahs and Torah to the world of Bria, I can actually, on Shabbat and on Rosh Chodesh, I can use a pillar which extends from the lower Gan Eden to the higher Gan Eden, which means from Yetzirah to Bria. And now I can give my mitzvahs a boost and get them up to the world where normally, big tzaddikim, etc., can naturally get their mitzvahs to. So beautiful sense of purpose for any time you're doing a mitzvah or learning Torah during the week, that Shabbat, you can focus back on them, as we said, and give them that boost so that they pierce into a higher world and create even more light than you probably could with my own natural capacity. And we're going to go on and look at exactly, and this is a key point of the Tanya, what it means to progress and to create positivity as a Jewish seeker. I learned meditation systems from the East, and there, my understanding was you want to elevate your own consciousness to the point where you reach transcendence, and then you're a transcended being, right? Then you're an enlightened being, and that it's you that's enlightened, right? Because the you is gone, the ego is gone, and now you're enlightened. In Judaism, yeah, there is such thing as self-nullification. There's many levels of it, but that's not really the point. That's not why we meditate, because in some sense, even if I've nullified myself, it's me that I've improved. And it's even the me that's nullified is now the thing that's improved. The reason I'm transcended is because it's no longer me, right? So it's still related to me in some subtle way. A mitzvah and Torah, as we learned, are completely nullified to God because that's just purely God's will. They're like a chariot. So when you're elevating Torah and mitzvahs, now you can actually elevate them and create perfect unity with the Ein Sof. So as we'll see, when we meditate, although yes, we work on ourselves, we improve ourselves, we refine our ego and maybe even nullify our ego and surrender our ego. But in the end, as we'll see, we still remain in what's called the abode, or the palaces of the different worlds. So we're somewhere in the actual worlds themselves, the spiritual worlds as a soul. But our Torah and mitzvahs, they elevate and they unify with godliness itself, with the 10 sfirot of whichever world I'm functioning in. So if you picture, when I'm meditating, as a user's guide for the soul student, when I'm meditating, you might think, I'm meditating, now I've made myself better. But remember, the point of meditating is so that your Torah and mitzvahs will elevate and will flow properly and will actually be able to unite with the sfirot of the Ein Sof itself. And there may be in a different world. I may be just in the world of a lower world, But that world, as we'll see, contains the 10 sfirot that contain the 10 sfirot above, etc. And eventually I get to God's essence. So it gets united no matter what level I personally am working at. So let's dive in. It's very exciting to me. We're on page 559 in the Tanya.
Michael, you were supposed to send us out some, I don't know what you would call them, the handouts that you were using last week. The video stuff that you were using last week.
Yes, I'm sorry. I haven't formatted in a way that it'll make a lot of sense, because like I said, right now it's like the animations are all on top of it. So I'm sorry. I keep missing that mark, and I didn't have a chance to reformat it to send. But I will try to do that, and bug me this afternoon. That'll be the better time to remind me. So text me, Rick, and make me do it while we're on the phone. That'll probably be most effective. But I apologize.
Okay, thank you.
והנה, כל זה הוא במדור הנשמות ומקום עמידתן, all the aforesaid.
All the aforesaid concerns the abode and station of the souls. The rabbi notes station is not necessarily synonymous with abode. A soul whose abode is in Yetzirah may raise periodically on Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh to a temporary station in Bria, as said above.
So we just learned that even though I normally function at one level on Shabbat, I can now boost and function at a higher level. So that's the difference between a station, right, and an abode, right? So abode is makom. So my regular place, what I'll share with you. My makom obviously is a siya. I wake up, I'm in the physical world, I'm dealing with physical things, and I have to meditate and pray in the morning to kind of raise my consciousness up to be aware of, that emotional world or even the intellectual world. But my natural world, I'm in a siya, like most people. I live in the physical and I deal with the physical world. So that's my abode. But amidatan, my place of standing, that I can change and I can push myself to aim higher than I just naturally, my normal stable consciousness, right? So there's two interesting terms, abode and station. Abode is where you naturally sit, where your soul is comfortable, where you wake up each day and you look out and that's the world you see. If you look out and you see pure godly intellectual energy, then maybe your abode is Bria. But most of us wake up and look out and see physical world. So if that's the case, as in most of us, then your abode is a siya in the physical, the spiritual side of the physical world. Whereas amidatan, your station, now that you can always change and work on, because of course you can pray, you can meditate on Shabbat, you're automatically boosted higher, and you can take journeys up and down the umbilical cord of your soul.
Cantor, do you assume that if you've been meditating and so on, that you've risen to Bria? I mean, how do you know which station you're in?
I don't think you assume that at all. It's work, right? So, you refine yourself and you work, and when you've transcended your normal consciousness, then you know it, right? So it's an indescribable spiritual thing, right? However, there's also a sense of inner knowing where you can push your soul to be active at the level of Yetzirah, even if it's not your normal consciousness. So we're complex beings, and I can mainly be conscious of the physical world as I'm focusing my mind and heart to work in the spiritual worlds. And maybe I'm not the kind of person that sees it in blinding light, but you also have a map of inner knowing where you can still, you can do very productive work, even if you're kind of a little bit in the dark when it comes to what's really happening at that soul level in myself. So I think it's complex, and you've always got to be assessing how genuine am I being? Am I being egotistical at this moment that I'm all excited because I'm having an experience? Am I distracted? Am I on automatic? It's work.
So you concentrate on the work. You don't really concentrate on, am I in Yetzirah or Bria? Or do you think that matters so much?
Yeah, I think it does matter, but it depends. It's not so much am I there, it's are my Torah mitzvahs being able to be elevated to that point, right? So if I know God wants this home we're creating for God to be a beautiful lit place, and I'm giving God nachas and pleasure, then it kind of feels right to me to be saying, well, hold on, can I aim at Bria? I mean, it's Shabbat. Let me really focus what this pillar is and what it means to intellectually generate emotions and really visualize my Torah and my mitzvahs, that those emotions are wings, and feel them elevating. And I'm not saying your imagination is the spiritual world of Bria, but there's something abstract behind the imagination that we can contact and we are dynamic in. That's our soul, right? So I think it really depends on the person and the day, but I absolutely would recommend people, as we're learning, focus on generating emotions intellectually and then using those to elevate Torah mitzvahs, and understanding that is directing their mitzvahs to elevate, as we'll learn with the 10 Sefirot in Bria. That's much more productive work, even if you're not a big tzaddik who can see it in blinding colors.
Thank you.
Yeah. Toratan v'avodatan nichalot mamash. B'yud Sefirot shehen b'chinat elokut ve'or ein sof mityached bahen betachlit hayichud.
Their Torah and divine service, however, are actually absorbed in the 10 Sefirot, which are a manifestation of godliness, and with which the Ein Sof light unites in perfect unity. That is, the Ein Sof light radiating in each world is completely unified with the Sefirot of that world.
So this is a big destination in the Tanya, because we spent a lot of time learning how to work on myself, how to be a Beinoni, how to, you can check the past chapters if that term is unfamiliar to you, how to meditate, to refine myself, how to generate emotions. But I'm not doing it to elevate me. I'm doing it, as we see here. My soul actually cannot unite with the 10 Sefirot, because no matter what, I'm a being who loves and who fears God. So no matter how intense my love and my fear become, there's still someone who's loving and someone who's fearing. So even at the very highest levels, there's still God and me, because if there weren't that separation, there's not me to love God. That vanishes, right? So no matter how lofty my soul travels, it's still a soul that loves and fears God. As we learned in chapter 35, it's only the mitzvahs and Torah that is so united with God that it can elevate and unite with the light that is in the Sefirot of that world. So all these Sefirot that we learned, if you learn Kabbalah with me, Chochmah, Bina, Da'at, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, each world, the godliness of that world is those 10 Sefirot. And yeah, it's just the godliness of the world of Asiya or Yetzirah, but as we'll learn, they're all inter-included. So my Torah and my mitzvahs can actually unite with the light flowing into those Sefirot of the world I'm functioning in, and my soul can never touch that. So always remember when you're meditating, this is not for me to become an enlightened being. Maybe that'll be a byproduct, and nice for us to become more sensitive and less crude, less coarse. But ultimately what I'm doing is I'm helping God. I'm trying to get the Torah and mitzvahs to unite with God, to create a home here in the physical world that is beautiful and full of light. V'hayinu b'yud Sefirot divriya al yedei dechilu rchimu
Right, and I call
sichlim.
you back. I'm in the Kabbalah class.
Let me go to the gallery. V'hayinu b'yud Sefirot divriya al yedei dechilu rchimu sichlim uv'yud Sefirot ditzira al yedei dechilu rchimu tiv'im.
Specifically, this means that one's Torah and divine service ascend to the 10 Sefirot of Bria when generated by intellectual fear and love, and to the 10 Sefirot of Yetzirah when prompted by natural fear and love.
So this is what we learned. When my wings of my mitzvah, which is love and awe, when they are my innate love and awe, because I'm a Jew and I have love and awe buried in me, even if I'm not conscious of it, and I scrub the surface a little and they pop out, and now my wings can elevate my mitzvahs, that will get me to the world of Yetzirah, because ultimately that was an emotional response. I was like an angel or like an animal that goes on instinct, and a Jew loves and fears God, and so just by instinct I did it, So that lives in the world of Yetzirah. But if I use the long short path we've learned, and I, with my intellect, generate emotions, those emotions are rooted in the intellect and in my free will, and they have the ability to raise the mitzvah all the way up to the 10 sefirot of Bria. So amazing light that creates. V'yud sefirot atsilut, u'vetochan melubashot yud sefirot atsilut u'miuchadot bahen betachlit.
Now within them, within the sefirot of Bria and Yetzirah, are clothed the 10 sefirot of the world of emanation, atsilut, and they are completely unified with them. The sefirot of atsilut are clothed in and completely unified with the sefirot of Bria and Yetzirah.
All right, so here I have my Kabbalist who's complaining and says, well, hold on, I worked so hard to unite my Torah mitzvahs with godliness. That's the 10 sefirot of Asiya, of Yetzirah or Bria. But I know about these worlds. I know there's a world above that. And compared to the world of Atsilut, the world of Bria is just like physical creation. It's no different. This is a created world. I want to unite with godliness, not just with a created world. And that's where it's we're projecting from ourselves, right? Because we picture the world as ourself. And if I'm in this room, I'm not also in this room. But with the 10 sefirot, they can be in this world and this world and this world, and they're all inter-included with each other. So when you're talking about the 10 sefirot that are united with God, the 10 sefirot of Atsilut are right there in the 10 sefirot of Bria, which are in the 10 sefirot of Yetzirah. So whichever world you're functioning in, rest assured, once your Torah mitzvahs are united with the 10 sefirot, they get to the 10 sefirot of Atsilut, which contain the actual Or Ein Sof, the light of God. That Atsilut is the world of godliness with no created beings whatsoever. So through this system of inter-inclusion, as long as I unite with the 10 sefirot, they are being united with God. Yes, they make more light if I can actually get them up to the world of Bria and unite there than in Yetzirah, but they've reached their destination and God has great nachas from it. Any questions on that? That's a few new ideas we introduced. I'm curious how you guys doing. And let me know any questions online. Okay, we'll keep going.
How do we know?
What was the giggle there? That was
Well, this is very hard. I find it
How
very,
do we, Cantor, how do we know God has nachas from it?
yeah.
only because God told us. Because God said, you know, I want you to do Torah mitzvahs. That's what I want. That's what's gonna be pleasure. And so that's how we know. Otherwise, we never know. Wouldn't know anything. Yeah.
Just assume. We assume.
I don't know if it's assumption. If someone tells me they like apple pie, now I'm not assuming they like apple pie. I'm assuming they're being honest with me. I don't think God would come and fool us. So I wouldn't call it an assumption. We had an encounter at Sinai, and God said, this is what gives me nachas. This is what gives me the most pleasure. This is what I dislike. Try and avoid it, right? Idol worship, murder. And this is what gives me nachas. So now that God told us, we rely on that. I don't know how else one would know what gives an infinite being nachas when we're finite beings. Yeah, but what's complicated about it? Let's touch
The
on
whole thing. So we all live in Asira, obviously. Okay, correct. We all
Asiya,
live there. Asira.
And we live in the bottom of Asiya, which is actually the physical world. Asiya also has spiritual worlds in it,
So
but I think most people live just in the physical world, which is the very bottom of Asiya.
so all of the mitzvahs we do start off down there, correct?
Yeah, it's a physical thing, right? So it starts off, it's a physical coin, goes in a physical box. That's Asiya. That's the physical world. That's where mitzvah can
And
only
then-
happen there.
And then our object is to try and raise these up, correct?
Yeah. So once it's done, once it happens in the physical world, now it's our job to raise it up. And how do we raise it up? By
It's vote.
By
Meditation.
meditation and Kavanah and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, Kavanah. So emotions,
Kavanah.
right?
Emotions.
Love and fear. When we say Kavanah in Chassidus, we don't mean that I'm seeing angels. We mean devotion. We mean like genuine love and genuine awe. Like when I give my wife, a beautiful ring for our 25th anniversary, I do it with a tremendous love for her. And I found the most beautiful ring that I could find. I know she'll love. And I do it with respect. I don't walk into her office while she's seeing a patient and say, oh, honey, here's the ring. See you later. Right. I make sure I find a time on her terms that's right. You know, I give it to her in a way that I know she'll appreciate. You know, she doesn't like, I'll get political. She doesn't like blood diamonds. So I'm not going to buy her a diamond that was mined in a way that she finds problematic. Right. That's our own personal shtick. But because I have respect for her, I'm going to pick the exact thing that she wants. I'm not going to cross any of her boundaries. Right. So same thing with God. Like we have that relationship with God and we put our love and our respect into the mitzvah. And that's what elevates it.
So we're doing these everyday mitzvahs that we're doing every day. And with more intensity and more love and awe, it's being raised slowly up to Yetzirah, correct?
Maybe slowly, I don't know. Maybe whatever speed, yeah. Yeah, but yeah, up to Yetzirah. But that's, and then from there, how do we get it to Bria? The difference between
how does the soul get it to Bria?
Well, the soul is in all of it, right? But the soul's in the abodes, the soul's in the worlds. But once I've actually elevated a mitzvah to Yetzirah by using what we call the instinctive emotions, right? You know, we all know we take a Torah and we feel a certain way. I don't have to meditate, right? I sit at my Seder with my grandkids and I feel a certain way. It's Jewish, right? I love doing it. It's just innate to me. Those are the emotions we can use to get it up, as you just described, to Yetzirah. To get it now from Yetzirah to Bria, that's where I need to meditate and use intellectually generated emotions. So where I sat and thought about this mitzvah and how it's giving God nachas and how it's a great way to connect with the one who commanded me, and whatever intellectual meditation I use to inspire my emotions, those are actually different. They're a different family of emotions because they journeyed down from my intellect, right? So because they started in intellect and then journeyed down, when they go back home, they go back up to the intellect. And so that's the same thing. Like they're a yo-yo that came from Bria. They went down and got the mitzvah, and then they got up back to Bria. Because where they started, like a yo-yo, tells you where they'll come back up. So if my emotional yo-yo starts in my instinctive emotions, and just because I'm Jewish, I love doing mitzvahs, okay, gets the mitzvah, it brings it back up to Yetzirah. But that's all. The yo-yo started in my emotional world, like an angel, and it can't get up to my intellectual world, Bria. But if it started with my intellect, so I meditated and I generated emotion, that now goes down all the way to get the mitzvah, and then where does it go back up to? Where it started, like my yo-yo. And now it gets up to the world of Bria because that's where it lives. The string that started in the intellect.
Okay.
So you want to look at where the emotion started, and that's the key the Alter Rebbe is teaching us here, to either get your mitzvahs up to the world of Yetzirah or even up to the world of Bria.
Okay. Right.
And that was too complicated again, maybe.
No. I think I'm starting
Wait,
to.
I'm in the other room.
Yeah. That wasn't for us.
Okay. I think I'm starting to understand it more and more. And the Ein Sof, God is happier, although he doesn't have emotions like happiness, whatever, but he's happier as the further up it goes, correct?
Do we think God doesn't have emotions like happiness?
Well, okay.
It's a question. Does God have emotions like happiness? Simcha, right?
I would think so.
Do we think?
But we can't give him not our happiness like we feel.
Okay. So we say God's thoughts aren't like our thoughts and God's emotions aren't like our emotions.
Right,
but where do our emotions stem from, right? If God creates us and everything in us, could God create something? Could there be something in us that doesn't also exist in potential in God in an infinite state? No. I mean, I can't write a book with an idea that didn't come from me, right? I mean, everything comes from me. So if there's such a thing as simcha in us, as joy, then there's infinite simcha in God, of all, any kind of simcha and unlimited simcha. So that's what chesed is. Chesed is loving kindness in an infinite state. So God definitely is the source of emotions and has infinite emotions. Yeah. So when we give God nachas, it's nachas like we can't believe because we only have limited nachas, right? And it feels so good. Imagine unlimited nachas just for me, bothering to put a little coin in a box, and God cares about it. Right? It's an incredible thought that we give God nachas on an infinite level by doing something here in our tiny little speck of a finite world. But we digress.
Okay. And we give him more nachas as we move it up. correct?
I would say yes. I would say yes. Although, not to discount, somebody that hasn't done, a particular mitzvah in many years, and they decide I'm going to go do it today, and they do it just on a basic level with a sense, maybe I should try this. Who can say maybe that gives God more nachas than the biggest tzaddik? So I'm not going to read God's mind, but in general, yeah, the higher the better.
Thank you.
The 10 sefirot v'yud sefirot atsilut miuchadot betachlit b'matzilin ein sof baruch hu. We're a third chunk down on 560.
The 10 sefirot of atsilut are in turn perfectly united with their emanator, the blessed Ein Sof. It follows then that by ascending to the sefirot of Beriah or Yetzirah, the soul's Torah and divine service actually unite with the Ein Sof.
I see Ron Selleck is watching, Mindy Shostak, so an old buddy from Habonim and an old buddy from school. Hi, guys. Good to hear you. Please add your comments. Good to have you here. And that's it. The point here is to unite the mitzvahs not with the 10 sefirot, but with God. And the 10 sefirot are united with God, and they contain the light of God, and each one is inter-included. So ultimately, these Torah mitzvahs, I'm sending them up to God with the best lift possible from my own emotional drive. The
souls, oh, let me unmute.
That's right. Oh, you got it.
The souls, on the other hand, in contrast with the Torah and divine service, are not absorbed into godliness of the 10 sefirot.
Right. So we are souls. We're the ones that are doing the mitzvah, and we love and fear God, and we're trying to connect to God. But it's in us that's loving and fearing God. So unlike the mitzvahs that are like a chariot and can unite completely with godliness, we're just standing in the abodes and the chambers. We're in these worlds, and it's the Torah and mitzvahs that we're elevating by our meditative emotions. V'nehenin miziv hashchina hu or ein sof baruch hu hamiuchad b'yud sefirot divriya or ditzira.
But stand instead in the chambers and abodes of Beriah or Yetzirah, which are the
next one.
world-
They're the soul's delight on 561.
You skip.
Oh, did I? Okay, go ahead. Let's do both. But stand instead. Go ahead, Noreen.
But stand instead in the chambers and abodes of Beriah or Yetzirah, which are the worlds of Beriah and Yetzirah, separate beings that are not united with God, as are the sefirot. There, the souls delight in the radiance of the Shekhinah, meaning the blessed Ein Sof, light as it is, unified with the 10 sefirot of Beriah or Yetzirah.
So here we're getting a glimpse of what we call Gan Eden, what we call heaven. And we learned, of course, there's a lower and a higher Gan Eden. The lower is Yetzirah, as we've been discussing. The higher is Beriah. And there, when after 120 years, my soul is in Gan Eden and is not flowing through a body with its nefesh level and anything like it is when it's alive, my vision is not so coarse as physical vision. My senses are not so coarse as physical senses, and my soul is now able to fully realize what this divine light looks like, and it's the biggest pleasure. Right? It's the biggest pleasure to be completely sensitive to spiritual pleasure, have all other pleasures now quieted down, and I'm a very fine-tuned device, and I'm just seeing this divine light that came from my Torah and mitzvahs, and it's an overwhelming pleasure for a soul to look at that. But look what it says. And by the way, here, abodes and chambers, this is a synonym for the different worlds within each world. Each world is divided into many, many infinite subworlds, and those are the abodes and the chambers. That's where our soul is in heaven, is in the various worlds and levels within each of these general categories of worlds as Yetzirah and Beriah. Just a side point. But what am I basking in? I'm basking in Ziv HaShekhinah, a ray, radiance from the Shekhinah. Radiance from the Shekhinah. So what I've done, my Torah and mitzvahs, that unites with godliness, and then a ray comes out from that, and that's the only thing that the soul can manage to, can withstand when it's in heaven. There's only so much pleasure that a soul can take, depending on how high you've elevated yourself in a lifetime, and then you can enjoy that ray from that level. But it's only a ray from the mitzvah, which means what? As we'll learn, all this stuff we learned about the pleasure of Gan Eden and the joy and the lower and the higher and the divine light and how beautiful it is, that's just the effect. That's not the cause. The mitzvah is the thing that's causing all that light in heaven that our souls will enjoy. So what's greater, the thing that causes the ray or the ray? Right? So even though we're here in the physical world and we're not seeing the light of our actions and of our meditations, we should remember that what we're handling here, when we're learning Torah, when we're putting a coin in a tzedakah box, when we're booing Haman, whatever it might be, that actually is even higher than anything we'll experience in heaven. That's why I say an hour of tshuva and of mitzvahs in this world is better than all the pleasure in heaven, because it's actually, heaven is being created right now by my Torah and mitzvahs. They are greater than anything I'll experience in heaven.
So when you die, does your soul go to one of these worlds?
Yes, when you die, your soul reverts up to its particular station, and that might change depending on the actions that you took in the world and the self-refinement you did. And then it remains at that station and always kind of moving upwards from its station, but still rooted to where its station is from its progress in the last life. And the light that it can withstand is the light of that world that it's in, and depends on its natural station of what point you've got it to.
You
So-
always taught us that the soul can come back down, though, correct? To somebody else.
Yeah, he's going to touch on Gilgul HaNefesh very shortly. And yeah, most, the classic, you're getting an a soul that's really, gone through soul school and done great, comes down for 3 different lives. And in each life, it rectifies one of these soul levels. So my soul level that's in a Siya called Nefesh, if you're doing a good job, you'll rectify that in one life. Then you'll be in the trove of souls in heaven. Then you come down for a second life. You'll rectify Yitzira, which is the level of Ruach of your soul. And then when you got that done, you go back up, and maybe 800 years later, you come down for a third life. You rectify the soul of Bria, the level of Bria, which is Neshama. And if we finish those 3 levels and you've rectified the entire conscious content of the soul, then you go back up and you wait for everybody else to finish their work. As we said, Reformed Judaism believes in a messianic era when everything's done, and then everybody comes back in whatever format. We won't argue about that. But that's like great work. You did it in 3 lives. That's amazing. Most of us mess up a little here and there, and we take more than 3 lives. So in Judaism, being an old soul is something like being a 45-year-old that's still in grade 4. It's not a compliment. The big compliment in Judaism is being a new soul, because there's some unique souls that come down that have never been here before, and they're very, very lofty souls. They didn't have to go through the step 1, 2, 3 or more. But we'll get to that.
Cantor,
Yes.
when you speak of stations, we started a station. Can you clarify that?
Yes. What was the terms we use? Let's stick with them. Abode, station, and abode.
So,
Okay, so
quickly.
say abode is where I live. So my house, that's my home. And a station might be, I went and I took the subway and I went to, Lionel Gros station in Montreal, but it's just a trip. I went away from my abode. What am I going to do afterwards? I'm going to come back to my abode, to my home. So in English, let's use those. My abode is where my soul is comfortable all the time. My station is when I'm alive, where I'm functioning right now, even if it's above or even below my natural station. Good question.
Thank you.
Vehu ziv toratan v'avodatan mamash ayin zohar v'kabel daf resh yud.
I guess it's me again. And this radiance that they enjoy is actually a ray of the light of their own Torah and divine service. For the reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. I read it.
Yeah, that's good. Ki shchar mitzvah hi mitzvah atzma. And that's a huge piece we're going to look at. The reward of a mitzvah is a mitzvah. As we said, this ray that our soul will enjoy in Gan Eden, it's just a byproduct, just a cause of the mitzvah. And when we say a reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself, the reward of mitzvah is the mitzvah, what we're saying is how do you understand what level of what quality something is by what comes out of it? By what comes out of it. I know someone is a great composer because I hear their song centuries later and I say, Bach, right? Gershwin, whatever, right? And so I know that the composer was a great composer by the songs they wrote. Now, of course, what's greater, a song on a piece of paper or the composer's creativity that wrote the song? They don't even compare, right? So Bach could have written, any other number of masterpieces, happened to write this one, but Bach, the composer, is greater than, of course, any composition. But by Bach's composition, now I see how great Bach was. So same thing happening here. From the reward of a mitzvah, I see the level of the mitzvah. And in this case, what's the reward of the mitzvah? It's the entirety of Gan Eden, it's heaven. Everything my soul is going to experience in heaven, all the light, all the beauty, all the pleasure, whatever level it is, it all came from my Torah and mitzvahs here while I'm alive. And so if, classically we think, a Jew wants to get into heaven because heaven's so great and will work hard to get in heaven. That's not the point, right? Heaven's just the reward for the mitzvah. Heaven's just, it's an afterthought. It's the effect of the mitzvah. Of course, if the reward of the mitzvah is heaven, now look how great the mitzvah is, right? So in the end, I should be much more excited about actually doing a mitzvah right here now than about thinking about, how wonderful and beautiful heaven's going to be. Because here, the word of the mitzvah is the mitzvah. It is what it is. It's even greater than heaven. So, something to think about. Let's go on a bit more. Now we're going to get into. So we looked at the service that comes, that is involved in the world of Yetzirah, which is service that is instinctive almost, is just my natural emotions. And then the service that leads to elevate mitzvah and Torah to the world of Bria, and that is my intellectually generated emotions. But there's this world of atsilut, which is above those. Now, I'm not saying any of us is gonna, often be able to travel up to a station at atsilut, although we'll see there are ways in our regular liturgy to do that, or to at least touch it in a small way. But what can we understand about this world of atsilut, and what does it mean to serve God at that level? And there's a question here. So is the mitzvah like the mitzvah mile the sun? Does anyone understand that? Is that a typo? So is the mitzvah like the mitzvah mile the sun? Or maybe there's a reference I'm not getting. Can someone explain that, or was that a typo, Joyce? I'll let you know. I'll let you respond if I misunderstood. So this world of atsilut, what's happening there? And how is atsilut defined? While the world of Yetzirah is defined by emotion, and the world of Bria is defined by intellect, the world of atsilut is defined by total self-nullification. If you remember, when we looked at the 4 letters of God's name, the He, which is the breadth of comprehension intellect, that illuminates Bria, but the Yud, that point of Chokhmah that you can't comprehend, that illuminates atsilut. And that Yud is total self-nullification, total surrender, total bitul. So there actually are no created beings yet in atsilut, right? It's just pure godliness. And so to work on that level, to have any chance to have a station at that level, you have to also flow with complete self-nullification, like the great tzaddikim that we describe as chariots. And if you think about it, if you're completely gone and there's no you, it's not love and awe anymore, it's something else, right? So a chariot, as we described, you tell a chariot to turn left, it doesn't say, yes, I love my driver, I'm going to turn left, or, oh, my driver's going to whip me if I don't turn. A chariot has no will, it just turns. The horse that I'm riding, yeah, it may have fear of me or love of me, and that will cause it to agree with my will, and it'll bend its will to my will. But a chariot, it's not even a question. Does a chariot love you? It's not even a question of a chariot. So that's the level of atsilut, this total self-nullification. And let's go inside. Ve'olam hatzilut shehu lamala me'asechel ve'hasaga ve'havana l'sechel nivra. Yeah, Doreen, you'll unmute for us. There you go.
There, the souls, and this radiance that they enjoy is actually a ray of light of their own Torah and divine service. See the Zohar. For the reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself.
Good. Let's stay on mute and go over the page and one more. The world of atsilut. You with us? The world of atsilut on 562.
62. I don't have it now. Okay. The world of Atzira is beyond the intellect, is beyond the intelligence, grasp, and understanding of a created being's intellect. Even a spiritual being in the world of Beriah is, after all, a created being, and the atsilut is beyond its grasp as well.
So any created being, where do we start? What's the beginning of our consciousness? It's always that spark of chokhmah. Higher than that, I can't go as a created being, because higher than that, there is no possibility of separation. It's just godliness. And so I can't use my intellect. It's not a tool that can get me above itself. It can't get me to the world of Atzilus. So to do that, I have to go what's called lamala mitam vadas, above sense and understanding, above any of it, and it's just pure surrender. It's pure self-nullification. It's a leap that the intellect doesn't understand. So it's not so much about love and awe anymore. In this case, it's something where there's no two beings for us to have love for anything. Ki chokmato uvinato v'dato shel Ein Sof baruch hu miyuchadot sham bo b'tachlit hayichud.
For the Chokmah, Bina, and Dat of the Ein Sof are united with him there in atsilut, in perfect unity.
Right? Yeah. When I'm down in Yetzirah, I can say, yeah, there's the hey, and there's Bina, and there's comprehension, and there's the Chokhmah, and I can distinguish between them. But when I'm in Atzilus, everything is so completely united. You can't talk about any kind of comprehension there. It's completely above comprehension. So by definition, we can't comprehend it, right? It's incomprehensible, right? How many ways can you say it? So because Chokhmah, Bina, and Dat which is the point of the Yud and the Hey of God's name, they're so united with God's essence, it's just godliness. And there's no way for intellect to leap up there. Intellect is already a created thing in that sense. In a
profound and wonderful unity, infinitely superior to that unity found in Bria.
Right. So yes, Bria is the higher Gan Eden, and from our place, it looks like it's so spiritual that it's almost infinite, or it is infinite. But from the perspective of Bria, looking at Atzilus, now that's infinite, and Bria seems just like physical world. It's such a leap down from Atzilus. Kisham Yordula here bivchina tzimtzum.
For there they descended to illuminate only to a restricted, contracted degree, the Chabad of atsilut, referred to here as Chabad of the Ein Sof, radiate in Beriah only after their light is contracted.
Right, so Chokhmah, Bina, and Dat, as they are in Atzilus, they're completely united with Ein Sof. They're infinite in the most perfect sense. To create anything that could have any sense of self, they have to contract and hide themselves and make a tiny pinhole. They only shine a little bit through, to the point where now there can be a separate being that can have any intellectual sense that it exists. So that sense that begins us, which is, this point, this spiritual point, which is the beginning of me and any conscious flow, that's the result of, if you like, the contraction from this highest world, my superconscious, in my own map of this inside. The contraction of the superconscious is now contracting such that I can have okay, I woke up and I'm Michael today. This is me. I'm awake. I'm alive. That all came from this massive contraction that happened. And the same, of course, with the cosmos and with the whole spiritual creation. For the beginning point of the entire creation to happen, Atzilus had to contract such that now there could be any sense of a possible individual being with any intellectual identity at all, right? So the beginning of the entire world of Bria, that's just the Chabad of atsilut contracting so that there can be Chokhmah and Bina ultimately, which illuminates Bria. Point being, huge contraction in Atzilus leads to the beginning of the world below it. For there, are we at the bottom? For there they descended? No. Kedei sheyuchlu schalim nivraim lekabel mehen chokhmah bina dat leida et Hashem lavin ulasig ezo hasaga be'or ein sof baruch hu.
So as to enable the intellect of created beings, namely the angels and souls of Bria, to receive Chabad, wisdom and understanding in knowledge from these Sefirot in atsilut, so that they might know God and so that they might grasp and comprehend something of the Ein Sof light.
Have you ever stopped and considered that I know there's dolphins and there's other intelligent beings, but really us, if there weren't humans on the world, there'd be no being that could comprehend the abstract beauty of God having created the world. I imagine there's no animals at all, no humans, no animals. It's just plants, right? And plants obviously don't have the same abstract thinking they do. I don't think they're as simple as we often think, but they don't certainly have the kind of brain that we have and the multiple brains we have. So God had to create beings that had intellect if there was going to be any created being that would be able to appreciate the beauty that God's creating the world, that we're that, right? And that's what's happening here. For God to have that in the world, God had to contract God's intellect to the point that we could stand the creative flow from God and still exist and not be completely nullified in that light, and just have a tiny bit that now becomes me. And I say, okay, here I am, and now I can meditate on God, or I could go off and do what I please. I have free will. I think I'm an independent being. Right? So God had to contract that whole world so that there could be intellectual beings like us who could have independent free will insights and could decide how we're going to go fishing with our own spark of chokhmah and whether we'll use it productively or non-productively. The extent kfi koach schalim hanivraim shehem baalei gvul v'tachlit.
To the extent, is it Susan or me?
Yeah, go ahead.
To the extent that the intellect of finite, limited, created beings is capable of understanding.
Right. So, of course, as brilliant as I can be, that's the spark that comes to me. And now, Susan, shelo yitbatlu bimtziutam velo yu begeder nivraim klal rach yachzeru lemim koram b'shvasham shehu b'chinat elokut mamash.
Me?
Yeah, please. Thanks.
To achieve this purpose, a contraction of Chabad of atsilut was necessarily least they created beings of Bria, dissolved out of existence, and least they furthermore cease altogether to exist as created beings, reverting instead to their source and root, namely godliness itself.
We'll start up again the 2nd of Adar there, 29th of Adar 2, rather. So that's the reality. The reason God contracts so much of God's intellect is because if I got just a thimbleful more than I'm getting, that would just dissolve my whole identity, right? I'm dealing with such a powerful source of energy. I need it contracted and contracted till there's just a tiny, tiny, fine supply coming to me. And that's, God knows exactly how much it can take. And just a little bit more and boom, my whole identity would be wiped away. I'd just be floating in infinity. There'd be no Michael. So that's why the reason we can have this whole intellectual world to wonder, to meditate, to have insights, to learn, that's because God's holding back in such a powerful, powerful way and creating just enough chokhmah for each of us to get us started. Any questions before we do a short little sit? Yeah, anything online? I see hello, Abba Mori. I see Nachas Ruach in Hebrew is Nachas. You'll explain that to me later. And hi, Elaine, thanks for watching. Let's take a moment to do exactly this, which is not just rely on our natural emotions, but use this intellect, this gift from God, to focus on a divine concept and generate emotions. And those are the emotions that can lift a mitzvah or this very Torah learning that we've done right up to the world of Bria. So try it. You never know who said we can't do it, right? Perhaps we can. So let's try it. What would happen? What would be the advantage, as they say, if we could actually elevate this Torah learning right to Bria, to unite with the 10 Sefirot of Bria? Let's see, who knows? So find yourself in a comfortable position wherever you are. And since our breath is the first appearance of the soul in the physical, let's allow that breath to lengthen, flow in an optimal way, deep in and out. And let's do the 4 stages of our breath as we've learned. We're going to, for 4, breathe in with me. 2, 3, 4. Hold that breath in. 2, 3, 4. Let the breath exhale. 2, 3, 4. And keep the breath out. 2, 3. Start the cycle again, breathing in. 3, 4. Remain full. 2, 3, 4. Release the breath. 2, 3, 4. Keep yourself empty. 2, 3. This time let your belly swell out as you breathe in. Nice and big like a baby. And as you hold the breath in, it stays nice and big below you. And have it pull up as you breathe out, pulling up towards your diaphragm, and stays pulled up as you hold that. Keep that cycle again. 1, 2, 3, 4. And breathing out. Let's open up our wisdom gateway as we've learned. There's a gateway between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. As we learned, that's where the chokhmah enters in. So you can see that gateway, open it up. And try and remain in that gateway as you continue breathing as we have. Now, let's put in that gateway this concept that each one of our mitzvahs, including this Torah study, we imbue it with the soul, with our emotions, the very emotions we're generating right now, picturing how much joy God has with this Torah study, elevating to whatever world it may. It's a beautiful feedback loop because God gets nachas, and then I'm happy God has nachas, and then God gets more nachas. It's this very love and awe I'm generating, which are elevating the Torah study that we're currently engaged in. Let that dynamic and those images, let them fill your mind right to the brim with every detail. Before we release the image, perhaps let's magnify it 3 or 4-fold, bigger in your mind's eye, brighter in your mind's eye, sharper colors, perhaps moving if it wasn't moving. Perhaps the sound of the Torah study rushing upwards. And very productive to remain here for 5, 10, 15 minutes if you have the time. So feel free to open your eyes, pause, and remain sitting. But if you're with me in the class, we're wrapping up. So we can open our eyes, wiggle our toes and our fingers. And welcome back. And doesn't that feel like you left your abode and you went to a different station? I mean, that's what it feels like to me. Doesn't it? Was it Sue Ellen? Was you asking that question?
Yes.
Susan, yeah. So that's how you travel to a different station. I mean, for a few minutes, I was lost from my physical, normal consciousness, and I was somewhere else. And you know, maybe a tzaddik would, you know, come back and say, I spoke to an angel. I don't know, it doesn't happen to me. But we travel from Abode to a different station. We do work. We come back down, and then we go back and continue our day. That's how it works. Does that ring
Yeah.
true to you?
Thank you, Cantor. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. All right,
Even if-
signing off from
Cantor, even if the work is a struggle.
Well, being in the flow, exactly. In some ways, if the work is a struggle, it's even more important and more constructive, because someone who really finds it easy, right? They don't have to put so much of themselves into it, and who knows how much is being invested. But as we'll learn, a Bainani who has to struggle, that's work. They're doing work that a tzaddik can never do, because a tzaddik doesn't have to struggle, and that struggle makes it sweeter. There's a whole section on that in the future, but that's the dynamic, right? If someone just whips something off, a drawing that takes them 4 minutes to do and hands it to you, you're like, great. If someone struggled and worked for 4 days on a drawing and gives that to you, okay, maybe it's not the same quality of art as the master artist, but wow, they put 4 days of work into a drawing. That means something, and it was really hard for them, right? So that gives me more joy, perhaps. So I wouldn't underestimate. Sometimes if the more struggle there is, the more value there is.
Thank God.
Thank God. Thank God. All right, signing off of I hear you there. Signing off of Facebook, and we'll stop our recording. Thanks, everyone.